You wake up every morning believing you are someone navigating through a world filled with other people. You check your phone, scan through messages, and immediately slip into the role of being you, the person with problems to solve, relationships to manage, and a life to live. Within minutes, you have forgotten the most fundamental truth that you are pure awareness itself, temporarily dreaming you are a separate individual. This forgetting happens automatically because the mind operates like a sophisticated virtual reality system. It creates the compelling illusion that awareness is something you possess rather than what you fundamentally are. The moment you identify with thoughts, emotions, or the stories running through your head, you step into the dream of separation. You become the actor instead of recognizing yourself as the stage where all experiences unfold. Most spiritual teaching focuses on techniques to maintain awareness, as if awareness were a state you could lose or find. This approach misses the crucial point entirely. Awareness cannot be lost because it forms the very ground of your being. What happens is that attention gets absorbed into the content of experience, thoughts, sensations, external events, and you forget your true nature. You mistake the waves for the ocean. But how do you remember what you are while fully engaging with the world? How do you function effectively in relationships, work, and daily responsibilities while remaining rooted in your essential nature as pure consciousness? Every morning, you perform an unconscious ritual of identity construction. You remember your name, your role, your relationships, and your problems. This process happens so smoothly that you never question it. The sense of being a separate person feels absolutely real and immediate. Your thoughts seem to originate from you, your emotions seem to belong to you, and your actions appear to be performed by you. This entire structure exists as a mental overlay on pure awareness. The separate self you believe yourself to be consists entirely of memories, thoughts, sensations, and mental stories. Strip away these elements, and what remains? Pure conscious presence, the awareness that was always here, completely untouched by the drama of personal identity. Recognition of your true nature doesn't require years of meditation or complex spiritual practices. It requires looking directly at experience in this moment. Right now, as you listen these words, what is aware of the listening? What knows that thoughts are occurring? What notices when emotions arise? This knowing presence is what you actually are, regardless of what thoughts or feelings might be present. The separate self operates like software running on the hardware of consciousness. The software creates a convincing user interface, complete with a sense of being located in a body, having a personal history, and facing an uncertain future. This interface serves practical functions, but mistaking it for your actual identity creates unnecessary suffering and limitation. When you recognize yourself as awareness itself, the entire structure of personal problems begins to dissolve. Who is there to have problems when the one who seemed to own them reveals itself to be a mental construct? What needs to be fixed when there was never anything broken? This recognition doesn't eliminate challenges from appearing in experience, but it removes the psychological burden of believing they belong to you. Most people around you operate from the default setting of unconsciousness, automatic reactions, recycled stories, and the constant need to defend or prove their positions. They live entirely identified with their mental patterns, completely unaware of the space between stimulus and response. When you interact with people operating from this field, their energy naturally draws you into the same momentum unless you remain rooted in awareness. Presence means maintaining a portion of attention resting inward while life unfolds outward. This doesn't mean becoming passive or withdrawn. You can speak, act, and engage fully while keeping background awareness of the silent space from which all experience arises. The moment this background awareness collapses, you get pulled back into the shared dream of separation and unconscious reactivity. Presence is always available because it's nothing more than the felt sense of being alive before thought describes the experience. You've known this presence in moments of deep laughter, honest awe, or the instant after waking when the mind is blank. These experiences prove the faculty already exists. Practice involves extending the duration of conscious recognition rather than creating something new. Why does this feel difficult around unconscious people? Because attention is contagious. Minds in proximity synchronize like metronomes. Walk into a room tense with unspoken resentment and notice how quickly muscles tighten. Enter a group laughing from the belly and feel your chest lighten before you learn the joke. The nervous system is wired for resonance. What flows around you seeks to imprint itself upon you. Presence transforms this automatic resonance into conscious choice. A reliable anchor helps maintain this conscious choice. Some people use the weight of hands resting on thighs, others sense the subtle energy at the heart center, and others focus on the calm pressure behind the brow. The specific anchor matters less than consistency of return. Each return reminds the body-mind where home is while external chaos swirls around. Consider a heated meeting where voices overlap and tensions rise. Instead of getting pulled into irritation, sense the lower half of the body and allow speech to slow by half a shade. You can still present facts and defend viewpoints, but words emerge from a quieter region. The atmosphere changes perceptibly. No announcement was made, yet a different tone enters the field and others begin matching it without knowing why. Presence doesn't guarantee harmony in every interaction. Some encounters will still feel abrasive and some personalities will remain difficult. What changes is the inner cost. Without the added weight of resistance, unpleasant moments arise and pass like weather instead of lodging as psychological residue. Later, walking away from the encounter, you notice the mind isn't busy rewriting the scene or rehearsing clever retorts. Energy that would have spiraled into mental recycling remains free for more vital use. When you recognize yourself as awareness, the sense of having a fixed center or core self begins to dissolve. This can initially feel disorienting because the mind has spent decades building and maintaining the story of being someone specific. The ego mind asks, if I'm not this personality with these characteristics and this history, then who am I? The question itself contains a false assumption, that you must be someone at all. Living without a center means functioning from an open space of awareness rather than from the constricted position of a separate individual. Actions still happen, decisions get made, and responses occur, but without the background sense of a doer claiming ownership of the process. Life begins to feel less effortful because you stop carrying the imaginary burden of being the one responsible for making everything happen. This shift often creates temporary confusion about motivation and direction. If there's no individual self to improve or protect, why engage with goals or ambitions? Why care about success or failure? The mind that previously operated on the fuel of becoming something better suddenly finds its primary driver gone. This can feel like loss of vitality or purpose until a deeper understanding emerges. What actually happens is that action begins flowing from wholeness rather than from lack. Instead of doing things to fix, improve, or complete yourself, activity arises spontaneously from the natural movement of life itself. You still work, create, love, and engage fully with existence, but from a place of overflow rather than neediness. The frantic quality of seeking something outside yourself to make you complete simply disappears. This understanding radically transforms relationships. Without a separate self to defend or project from, interactions become infinitely more spacious and authentic. You stop looking to others to validate your identity or complete your sense of wholeness. You cease demanding that people behave in specific ways to maintain your emotional equilibrium. Relationships shift from transactions designed to meet psychological needs to expressions of the same consciousness recognizing itself in different forms. The absence of a fixed center also eliminates the possibility of taking things personally. When someone criticizes, blames, or acts hostile, where is the separate person these actions could hurt? Insults and praise alike move through the field of awareness like clouds through sky, visible but unable to disturb the fundamental spaciousness of what you are. Self-remembering means maintaining conscious awareness of your own existence while engaged in daily activities. Most people walk through life aware of countless external details while completely forgetting the aware presence that perceives everything. They notice traffic, conversations, tasks, and problems while remaining unconscious of the one who witnesses it all. This forgetting of yourself creates a sense of being scattered and pulled in multiple directions. Your attention fragments among thoughts about the past, concerns about the future, and reactions to present circumstances. Self-remembering gathers this scattered attention into coherent presence. You remain aware of what you're doing while simultaneously aware that you're the one doing it. The practice is remarkably simple. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, remember that you exist. Stay conscious of your own presence while engaging with experience. Walking down the street, notice the shops and people while also noticing the aware presence that sees them all. During conversations, listen to the other person while maintaining awareness of the listener. In meetings, participate fully while staying connected to the space of consciousness from which participation arises. This simple awareness changes everything. It transforms automatic habits into conscious actions. It gives weight to your words, clarity to your emotions, and depth to your presence. You begin noticing how often you've been operating on autopilot, how often the body moved while the mind wandered elsewhere. Self-remembering provides an anchor, a quiet watcher behind every moment. The watcher doesn't judge or interfere. It doesn't try to control thoughts or fix emotional reactions. It simply sees. And in that seeing, something naturally transforms. You stop reacting blindly and start responding consciously. You stop getting lost in mental commentary and start noticing thoughts as temporary movements in awareness. Over time, this self-awareness becomes your natural center, not a fixed point of identity, but a continuous field of presence. External circumstances may shift and other people may come and go, but this conscious recognition remains stable. It grounds you without limiting you. It provides structure without creating rigidity. From the perspective of pure awareness, emotions and thoughts appear as temporary modifications of consciousness rather than personal possessions. They arise within your field of awareness like clouds forming in sky, remain visible for a period, then dissolve back into the vastness from which they emerged. The key shift involves learning to observe these phenomena without claiming ownership of them. When anger arises, instead of saying, "I am angry," observe it as, "Anger is arising." This subtle change in language reflects a profound change in understanding. You begin recognizing emotions as passing weather patterns rather than expressions of your fundamental nature. The same principle applies to all mental and emotional content: fear, sadness, excitement, thoughts, memories, and fantasies all receive the same witnessing attention without personal identification. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or intellectually detached. You can feel emotions fully while recognizing that you are the spacious awareness in which they appear rather than the temporary patterns themselves. In fact, emotions often move through more easily when you stop resisting their presence or trying to maintain them beyond their natural duration. The Western psychological approach focuses on analyzing emotional patterns, understanding their origins, working through past traumas, and developing strategies for emotional regulation. While this approach has value in certain contexts, it often strengthens the very sense of being a separate person with problems that need solving. The Eastern approach involves watching emotional content without getting entangled in the stories that surround it. When you observe emotions without claiming them as yours, something remarkable happens: they begin losing their compulsive power. Fear still arises, but it doesn't control your actions. Sadness moves through, but it doesn't define your state. Anger appears, but it doesn't hijack your behavior. You remain free to respond appropriately to situations rather than reacting from emotional conditioning. This witnessing awareness extends to thoughts as well. The mind produces thousands of thoughts daily, most of them repetitive, many of them irrelevant to present circumstances, and some of them actively unhelpful. When you identify with this mental chatter, it feels like being trapped in a noisy room with no exit. When you recognize thoughts as temporary appearances in awareness, they lose their tyrannical hold over your attention. You don't need to fight thoughts or try to silence the mind through force. Mental activity naturally settles when it stops receiving the fuel of identification. Thoughts continue arising. This is the mind's natural function, but they no longer demand your complete attention or dictate your emotional state. Living from awareness while managing practical responsibilities requires understanding that consciousness itself has no conflict with worldly engagement. The belief that spiritual realization leads to detachment from ordinary life stems from misunderstanding what awakening actually involves. True recognition of your essential nature enhances your effectiveness in every area of life rather than diminishing it. In work situations, operating from awareness means bringing full presence to whatever task is at hand. Instead of working from anxiety, ambition, or the need to prove yourself, activity flows from a centered place of clear seeing. You can pursue professional goals without psychological attachment to outcomes. You can engage competitively without making success a matter of personal identity. You can handle criticism or praise with equanimity because neither touches what you fundamentally are. Financial responsibilities become much simpler when approached from awareness. Money becomes a neutral tool rather than a reflection of personal worth or security. You make practical decisions about earning, spending, and saving from clarity rather than fear. The mental drama around financial security, the constant worry about having enough or the compulsive drive to accumulate more, naturally dissolves when you recognize your essential nature as pure consciousness. Relationships transform dramatically when both people begin operating from awareness rather than from personality-based needs. Instead of seeking completion through another person, you interact from wholeness. Instead of defending against perceived threats to your identity, you respond to what's actually happening in the moment. Instead of trying to change or control the other person, you allow them to be exactly as they are while maintaining clear boundaries when necessary. This doesn't mean becoming passive or losing the ability to say no. Healthy boundaries emerge naturally from clarity rather than from defensive reactivity. You can disagree with someone, set limits on their behavior, or even end relationships when necessary, all without the emotional charge of taking things personally. Actions flow from wisdom rather than woundedness. Parenting from awareness involves modeling presence rather than trying to control outcomes. Children naturally respond to authentic presence with more openness and cooperation than they show toward parental anxiety or manipulation. When you remain centered in awareness, you can guide children firmly and lovingly without getting caught in power struggles or taking their developmental phases personally. Traditional decision-making involves the separate self weighing options, analyzing possibilities, and choosing what seems best for personal interests. This process often creates internal conflict because different aspects of personality have different preferences. The mind creates elaborate pros and cons lists while emotions pull in various directions. The final choice frequently feels forced rather than natural. When operating from awareness, decision-making becomes much more organic and effortless. Instead of a separate individual trying to figure out the best choice, clarity simply emerges from conscious presence. You tune into what the present moment is asking for rather than what the personality thinks it wants. This attunement to life's natural flow eliminates much of the mental struggle typically associated with important decisions. This doesn't mean becoming impulsive or failing to consider practical consequences. Awareness includes intelligence, discernment, and the ability to project likely outcomes of various choices. The difference lies in where decisions originate, from the constricted perspective of a separate self or from the open field of consciousness itself. When facing major life decisions, you can sense what direction serves the highest good rather than just personal preferences. Sometimes this means choosing options that the personality mind would resist. Sometimes it means trusting intuitive knowing over rational analysis. Always it means remaining open to possibilities beyond what the limited self could imagine. The decision-making process becomes increasingly simple as you learn to distinguish between the voice of ego and the guidance of awareness. Ego-based decisions carry a quality of tension, effort, and struggle. They often involve trying to control outcomes or manipulating circumstances for personal advantage. Awareness-based decisions feel natural, effortless, and aligned with life's larger movement. Operating from awareness doesn't eliminate challenging situations from your life. People may still behave unconsciously, circumstances may still feel overwhelming, and conflicts may still arise. The difference lies in your relationship to these experiences rather than their occurrence. When someone acts from unconsciousness, through criticism, manipulation, or aggression, you can respond from stability rather than reactive defensiveness. This doesn't mean accepting inappropriate behavior or failing to establish boundaries. It means maintaining your center while addressing whatever needs attention in the situation. The key skill involves hearing words without absorbing the emotional charge behind them. When someone complains, you can recognize pain beneath the blame. When someone brags, you can sense insecurity beneath the display. Seeing behind the mask prevents you from judging the mask and also prevents you from volunteering as the next link in the chain of reactivity. Sometimes the most transformative response is steady silence that neither confirms nor condemns. Silence ends many arguments that words could only prolong. Other times, clear direct communication serves the situation better. Awareness provides the discernment to know which response serves the highest good in each moment. Physical environments can also challenge your ability to remain centered. Dense office environments, crowded social gatherings, or family dynamics charged with unspoken tension all carry energetic qualities that can pull you into unconscious reactivity. During sustained exposure to such environments, brief returns to solitude become essential medicine. 10 minutes with eyes closed, not performing any special technique but simply sensing the alive field within, empties the static accumulated from other minds. This isn't about escape but about recalibration, ensuring that upon re-entry you remain the thermostat setting the emotional tone rather than the thermometer merely reflecting surrounding conditions. One of the most common concerns about spiritual awakening involves the fear that recognizing your true nature will eliminate all motivation and ambition. People worry that seeing through the separate self means losing the drive to create, achieve, or contribute meaningfully to the world. This fear stems from misunderstanding what actually changes when you recognize yourself as awareness. The shift is from acting from lack to acting from wholeness. Previously, you pursued goals because you felt incomplete and imagined that achieving certain outcomes would provide the missing pieces. Career success, relationship satisfaction, creative recognition, financial security, all served as projected solutions to the underlying sense of being a separate, limited individual in need of fulfillment. From awareness, action arises from the natural movement of life rather than from psychological compulsion. You might still pursue professional success, create artistic works, or build loving relationships, but from inspiration rather than desperation. The quality of engagement changes completely even when external actions appear similar. Many people find that recognizing their essential nature actually increases their effectiveness and creativity. Without the drag of psychological resistance, mental energy becomes available for focused attention to whatever task is at hand. Without the need to prove anything to anyone, you can engage challenges with playful intensity rather than desperate effort. Goals become preferences rather than requirements for happiness. You can work toward desired outcomes while remaining unattached to specific results. Success brings satisfaction without inflating identity. Failure brings learning opportunities without crushing self-worth. The emotional roller coaster of chasing achievements levels out into steady engagement with life's possibilities. Some people experience a temporary period of reduced ambition after initial recognition of their true nature. This happens because the personality-based motivational structure needs time to reorganize around this new understanding. The old drivers of fear, pride, and neediness lose their compelling power before new forms of natural motivation fully emerge. When you recognize yourself as awareness, your entire approach to relationships undergoes fundamental transformation. Previously, you related to others as separate individuals who could either meet your needs or threaten your well-being. Each person represented a potential source of validation, security, pleasure, or danger. Relationships became complex negotiations designed to maximize personal benefits while minimizing psychological risks. From non-dual understanding, you recognize other people as expressions of the same consciousness that you are. This doesn't mean losing the ability to discern individual differences or pretending that everyone has the same level of awareness. It means recognizing that behind all personality differences lies the same essential nature that you discover in yourself. This recognition eliminates the possibility of taking interpersonal conflicts personally. When someone criticizes you, acts rudely, or expresses disagreement, where is the separate person who could be hurt? The awareness that you are remains completely untouched by external opinions or behaviors. You can respond appropriately to situations without the added burden of wounded identity. Love becomes unconditional because it's no longer based on what others do for you or how they make you feel. Love reveals itself as the natural recognition of shared being rather than an emotion dependent on specific behaviors or characteristics. You can love people regardless of whether their personalities mesh comfortably with your preferences. You can love someone unconditionally while still choosing not to spend time with them if their actions create unnecessary drama. You can care deeply about someone's well-being while refusing to enable their unconscious patterns. Intimate partnerships become expressions of wholeness rather than attempts to complete each other. Two whole beings sharing life together create far more depth and richness than two incomplete individuals trying to find fulfillment through their connection. The relationship becomes a context for mutual growth and recognition rather than a solution to personal deficits. Communication becomes much more direct and honest because there's less psychological defensiveness to navigate. You can express feelings, needs, and preferences clearly without the fear that others might judge or reject your true nature. You can also receive feedback without interpreting it as personal attack or validation. The separate self lives in constant background anxiety about its eventual dissolution. This fear of death colors every life decision, creates urgency around achievements, and generates desperate attempts to create lasting legacy or meaning. When you recognize yourself as pure awareness, the entire framework of mortality shifts dramatically. What can die? The body will certainly cease functioning at some point. The personality, the collection of memories, preferences, and mental patterns, will disperse when the brain stops operating. But what about the awareness that witnesses both body and personality? Can consciousness itself be destroyed? Looking directly at your present experience, you find no evidence that awareness can be damaged, diminished, or destroyed by any external circumstance. Awareness remains equally present during pleasant and painful experiences. It continues unchanged through all emotional states. It persists consistently throughout the transitions between waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. The fear of death dissolves when you realize that you are not the temporary forms that arise within consciousness but consciousness itself. Bodies come and go, personalities develop and fade, but the aware presence that witnesses all appearances remains untouched by any transition. This doesn't require believing in personal immortality or reincarnation of individual souls. It involves recognizing what you actually are right now in direct experience. When you see clearly that you are awareness itself rather than objects appearing within awareness, the possibility of extinction becomes meaningless. Living without death anxiety creates tremendous freedom in daily choices. You can take reasonable risks, express authentic truth, and follow genuine interests without the paralyzing fear that making wrong choices will waste your limited time. You can age gracefully without desperately clinging to youth or frantically rushing to accomplish everything before time runs out. This perspective also transforms your relationship to loss and grief. When loved ones die, you can feel sadness about losing their physical presence while recognizing that their essential nature, the same awareness that you are, cannot be destroyed. Grief becomes a natural response to temporary separation rather than permanent loss. Perhaps the most significant shift in living from awareness involves the end of spiritual seeking itself. For many people, the path to awakening involves years or decades of searching for truth through various practices, teachers, and experiences. The seeking mind believes that enlightenment exists somewhere other than here, at some time other than now, for someone other than who you currently are. Seeking perpetuates the very sense of separation that it aims to transcend. The seeker is a separate individual looking for something they don't currently possess. Every spiritual practice performed from this perspective reinforces the belief that you are not yet what you need to become. Every book read, retreat attended, or teaching received confirms the assumption that truth lies outside your immediate experience. Recognition of your true nature as awareness reveals that seeking was always based on a false premise. You were never separate from what you sought. You never lacked the very consciousness that you are. The entire spiritual journey was consciousness exploring itself, pretending to be lost so it could experience the joy of self-discovery. The end of seeking brings tremendous relief because the exhausting project of self-improvement finally concludes. There's nothing wrong with you that needs fixing. There's nothing missing that requires acquisition. There's nowhere else you need to go to be complete. The simplicity of just being exactly what you already are becomes obvious and natural. Some people fear that without seeking, they'll become complacent or stop growing. The opposite typically occurs. When psychological energy is no longer consumed by the futile project of trying to become someone else, it becomes available for genuine creativity, service, and spontaneous exploration. Growth continues, but organically rather than forcefully. Living as awareness while managing practical responsibilities requires ongoing attention rather than one-time realization. The mind has decades of conditioning toward separation and identification. These patterns continue arising even after clear recognition of your true nature. The difference is that you no longer mistake these patterns for reality. The most effective daily practice involves gentle self-remembering throughout ordinary activities. While brushing teeth, remain aware of the one who brushes. While driving, stay conscious of the aware presence that witnesses traffic and navigation. While listening to others speak, notice the listening awareness itself. Every moment provides perfect opportunity to remember what you are. Waiting in line, walking upstairs, eating meals, answering emails, each activity becomes a chance to return attention to the awareness from which all experience arises. When you forget, and you will forget repeatedly, simply return to present moment awareness without self-judgment. The forgetting is part of the process, not a failure. Each return strengthens the recognition until conscious awareness becomes your natural resting place rather than an achievement requiring effort. Some days awareness feels effortless and obvious. Other days the pull of identification seems overwhelming. Both experiences arise within the same consciousness that you are. Neither confirms nor denies your essential nature. Weather patterns in awareness, like weather patterns in sky, have no power to disturb the fundamental spaciousness. The integration process typically involves periodic returns to deeper silence, whether through formal meditation, contemplative walks in nature, or simply sitting quietly without agenda. These returns refresh your recognition of what you are beneath all temporary experiences and mental activity. Eventually, the distinction between spiritual understanding and ordinary life dissolves completely. You stop thinking of awareness as something special that you occasionally access and start recognizing it as the most natural, obvious fact of experience. Consciousness reveals itself as the seamless foundation of every moment rather than an elevated state to be maintained. This is the fulfillment that seeking always pointed toward. The end of separation, the completion of the circle, the recognition that you never left home. You are the awareness in which all experience appears. There is nothing else to know.